very much welcome. Before I start, my speech is entitled The Irresistible and Happy Political and Cultural Rise of the Front National in France. And I shall be speaking to that for about half an hour. But before I start, I thought I'd share with you a little story that happened to me this morning. I actually came to London by bus. There was problems with the trains. I live in North London, actually in Watford, a bit further on. And so I got a bus, the 113, that goes right up into Marble Arch, which you actually get from Edgware. I thought this would be a nice journey, and I looked it up. 40 minutes it would take. It was doing very well, and the automated voice told us everything about where we were. We got to Colindale, we got to the Birkdale Museum in Hendon, we got to Finchley Road, and then we came very near St John's Wood. Now that was a very happy hunting ground for me, because I was a Westminster City Councillor for 8 years, from 1974 to 1982. So I know the area very well. Just before we got to the end of the St John's Wood Road, we passed Wellington Hospital for the wealthy. That was announced. And then the automated voice said, we're just passing Lord's Cricket Ground. I thought, that is absolutely marvellous. I'm a cricket fanatic. I go as much as I can. I sit up all night watching the test matches, that sort of nonsense. Do you understand? So in that time I thought, oh, there's Regent's Park on the left. A little bit further on, the voice came up and said, and this is, no, it must be saying Regent's Park, this is Regent's Park Mosque. And I thought, well, I'm not being critical of the people who attend that appalling building, appalling in the sense of its architecture, but why couldn't the announcer have said Regent's Park itself, one of the loveliest parks in London, or London Zoo, or whatever. So I just mentioned that because it is in a sense a sign of the times, isn't it? We're moving into uncharted waters in this country. We don't really know what's going to happen next. The political class certainly is very unpopular. Right, well now, the Front National does not have a particularly good name in this country, largely because the media have sought to attack it left, right and centre, and have made no serious efforts to understand what the party is really about. So a little bit about the foundation of the FN. It was in fact founded in October 1972 by the great nationalist politician of the time, Jean-Marie Lepen, and a man called Jean-Louis Tixier-Vignancourt, who was a lawyer who defended the OAS people who had fought for French Algeria against the guerrillas there. Also there was a man called Roger Hollande, known as one of the nostalgiques, in other words, one of the traditional nationalist right-wingers who spent years in France fighting for his cause. In fact, I've got a little sheet about Roger Hollande. Anyone who would like to see it, I'll leave it here. Perhaps you could have a look at it afterwards. But the thing about him was he was a Dien Bien Phu in 1954. He fought for South Vietnam. He fought in the Algerian Civil War along with Lieutenant Lepen and others. And he's widely regarded on the traditional right as a hero. Very fine man indeed. I've actually known him for a long time. And he's a great man. The other people who were amongst the founders was a man called Dominique Chaboche, Alain Robert, François Duprat, who became an administrator in the Congo and was a very fine French patriot and a very fine man indeed in his own right, and a great writer, nationalist writer called François Brignot, who's recently died. So the inaugural meeting of the FN on the 5th of October 1972 comprised some quite high quality people. But what one has to consider is what were the various inspirations which brought people together to try to produce a nationalist movement in France. I've divided these into 5. They were all backed by the idea of nationhood or nationalism. And I think there are probably 5 principal sources. The first is the military, quasi-military background. I mentioned South Vietnam, those who supported French idealism in supporting the state of South Vietnam would come together. Those who were amongst the people known as the Pieds Noirs, namely the French people who lived in Algeria and who wanted Algeria to remain a department of France. And things of some of the heroes like Roger de Geldre, who met the firing squad. In fact, Albert Dovercar, you may have seen the film, the famous film, what's it called, with...
Battle of Algiers.
No, not the Battle of Algiers. Anyway, I'll think of it.
Jackal?
Yeah, the Jackal. Yeah, the Jackal. Quite a lot of that actually is recounted in that. Then before that, the sort of people who would be inspired by the onset of the new nationalist movement would be the various right-wing leagues who fought against the communists in the streets of Paris in January, February and March of 1934. You may not be aware of this, but there was a very considerable feeling in France that the country was about to go communist. And so a lot of people of patriotic instinct and endeavour got together in various leagues. There was a man of Gregory knows of him, read about him, Colonel de la Roque, who led the Croix de Fer, approximately 2,000 to 3,000 street fighters who took on the Reds in the Place de la Concorde and elsewhere. Huge battles went on for about 5 days, and the communists took a damn good hiding. Good thing too. And lined up with them were the military wing of Action Française, which is the French royalist movement under Charles Maurras, French intellectual writer, highly regarded throughout France, and they were known as the Camelots du Roi. They were equally strong in their belief that France needed something better than a communist insurrection. And of course the French government of Blum and others were so weak that they weren't really in a position to stop it. So the military, quasi-military background, the royalist background was less small, but basically people who rejected the French Revolution of 1789 and fell under the leadership of Charles Maurras, Léon Daudet and others in the Action Française. And then numerous French Catholic writers of possibly 50 years before that. Some of the names may be familiar: Charles Péguy, Jacques Maritain, and more recently after that, Chrétienté Solidarité, Christian Solidarity under the FN Catholic leader Bernard Antony. All these people had written considerably and were very much in favour of the setting up of some inspirational movement which would give France a really strong nationalist movement. And then you had the intellectual right-wing think tanks. There's an organisation called the Club d'Horloge, or the Clock Club, under another intellectual called Jean-Yves Le Gallou, who came to be a Front National MEP for many years, Ivan Blot, another intellectual, Robert Brasselach, famous French poet, and Maurice Bardèche, who wrote a very fine book called Qu'est-ce que c'est le fascisme? After the war, which I've got at home. And then there was a movement called GRECE, G-R-E-C-E, run by a man called Alain de Benoit, who actually was a pagan. He never actually joined the FN, and he never supported the basis of the movement. And then finally, you've got the sort of group who had none of these connections at all, but were basically patriotic types of centre-right, right-wing persuasion, called the Solidarists. That's how they came to be known. They were under the leadership of Jean-Pierre Stirbois and his wife Marie-France Stirbois. I used to meet up with Marie-France Stirbois after Jean-Pierre Stirbois' death. He was killed in a road accident in 1985, which was all very sad. Marie-France Stirbois was a wonderful woman and was actually the first FN candidate to enter the Élysée Palace. She got elected into the French Parliament in 1983 for the seat of Dreux, which was a dormitory seat to the west of Paris, and spent several years in the French Parliament. But of course, behind it all, and at the centre of the leadership, was Jean-Marie Le Pen himself. Jean-Marie Le Pen actually entered the French Parliament as a Poujadist in 1956. And then he resigned his seat to fight at Suez. Well, these people are fighters, aren't they? And he fought in the Suez campaign. He later regained his seat. He's always said he very much regrets that he didn't contest the 1965 French presidential election. But he was the agent for Jean-Louis Tixier-Vignancourt, and if he'd started, he thinks, 10 years earlier, he might have got slightly further than in the event he did. All right, so this meeting took place 5th of October 1972, a crowd of 2,500 in the largest hall in Paris. Very patriotic, lots of flags, overseas delegates, including Giorgio Almirante, who was head of the MSI movement in Italy, and Arturo Michelini, who also belonged to that movement. Unfortunately, the development of the party was very, very slow. The people in charge called it years in the wilderness. From 1972 to 82, a lot of writing was done, a lot of theorizing was done, but very little in terms of political achievement. You get 2% here, 4% there, 1% here. And I think a lot of them felt it's just not going to be the way, we won't achieve it. But there was quite a bit of improvement in or around 1985 for reasons which most experts on the movement can't readily explain. But the fact is that in a period of as little as 14 months, the FN came to be a party of progress. Large numbers, particularly young people at university, particularly law students, as in fact in Rome in Italy, who had joined the neo-fascist movement, the MSI in Italy, joined up. And in 1986, when President Mitterrand introduced proportional representation, the FN got 36 MPs elected to the French Parliament, including 2 who are still there. They were defeated, but they've got back again. Bruno Gollnisch is one, that may be a name you know of, and Jean-François Jacques, who was the party's expert on immigration and who made a massive contribution to the party in the mid-80s. So 36 deputies, all of very high quality, including a man called François Bachelot, who was a leading cancer surgeon in France. There were lawyers, there were accountants, there were business people, there were artisans, representing the entire French community. And the party was regularly getting 12–14% of the vote. So that was something very, very considerable. But then the PR system came to an end in 1989, and the party went back in decline and really marked time for quite a lot of the period, unfortunately. And then they had a really shocking split. I wonder if people remember this. In 1998, 1999, the deputy leader of the Front National, a man called Bruno Maigret, decided to set up a rival party called the MNR. And there was a big split in nationalist ranks. Well, eventually Le Pen came up on top, but Maigret took about 40% of the membership with him, and it took some time to settle things down. But again, they recovered pretty quickly. And by 2002, Le Pen had stood as the presidential candidate of the Front National against Chirac and Jospin. And shock horror, Le Pen knocked Jospin out of the race. Do people remember that? People thought the world was about to end. How could we have a man like Le Pen as president of France? Well, because in the event, the enemies set up a Republican front and ensured that he wouldn't get elected. He ended up with 19% of the vote, whereas Chirac got 81%. Nevertheless, that was a pretty huge achievement. And so that was a sign of what the party could do, but there was a growing feeling that shouldn't the old man retire? There was pressure on him to retire. He'd made one or two pretty appalling comments, which I'll come to in a moment. And so the person who might well have succeeded him was Bruno Gollnisch, who was Dean of Law School at the University of Lyon, and an intellectual and scholar of very, very high standards. But of course, Jean-Marie Le Pen wanted his daughter to succeed him, Marine Le Pen. So who is Marine Le Pen? She's the youngest of three of Le Pen's daughters. The first daughter, Caroline Le Pen, fell out with Jean-Marie and ceased to have anything to do with it because she had supported Maigret in the split. The second daughter, Jeanne Le Pen, she married a man called Samuel Maréchal, who was the director of the National Front's, the Front National's youth movement, called the Front National de la Jeunesse. She was one of the more pleasant, if you like, of the three girls, the other two being extremely assertive. And Marine was the youngest. Well, Marine was very ambitious. She qualified as a lawyer, but she decided to give her time to the development of the party. And so, when, in a couple of years, moving on to 2008, the party had elections to succeed Jean-Marie Le Pen. Marine Le Pen won with 2/3 of the vote. And since she's become leader, she has been absolutely top class, a first-rate speaker, very wise, a safe pair of hands, able to enunciate party policy with great facility, and not making any of the rather foolish blunders that her father was prone to make, some of the barbs for which he, I think, quite probably has been rightly criticised. And you will probably be aware that at the most recent European elections, the party got 24 MEPs, including people of quite outstanding quality, apart from Gollnisch, Marine Le Pen herself, Jean-François Jalco I've referred to, a man called Florian Philippot, the leading civil servant, and he was the party's main spokesman on economic affairs. It's got many more MEPs than the UMP, which has gone flat. And that great crook Sarkozy is trying to get back on board in that party. The party leader, Copé, is a complete gangster. So they're not going to get anywhere, frankly. The FN is in very good position, in a position to challenge for the presidency of France when the time comes. Now, I make this comment, and you may well disagree with me. I think the UKIP party in this country has made a very serious mistake in not seeking some sort of alliance. Needn't be a complete alliance, with some understanding with the FN in the European Parliament. They would have 48 MEPs, because UKIP also have got 24 MEPs. Nigel Farage has said, because the party has a reputation for anti-Semitism. Well, I want to say something about that a little bit later on. But I'd like to get now to the main sort of thrust of FN policy. All their policies are highly developed. They have first-rate spokesmen who put forward the policies. I know something of this because I joined the Front National, an English member of the FN, in 1992, and I've been a member ever since. And I used to hold discussions with the late Alfred Sherman, known to Gregory. I don't think Gregory liked Alfred Sherman, but he was a great scholar, wasn't he? He ran the Centre for Policy Studies, and he was very much instrumental in trying to get a better view of the FN in this country. I suppose you'd have to say the main thrust of economic policy is that of economic nationalism, protection of the home market against too much in the way of imported goods, rejection of international finance capitalism and laissez-faire liberalism, which has been the tradition of English parties. In other words, complete rejection of globalism. Because all globalism does is it benefits the international finance capitalists and very few other people. It certainly doesn't benefit people who don't have great wealth in this country, nor indeed people who don't have great wealth in France. Now, all parts of the FN are encouraged, therefore, to develop the economic message as a primacy. In other words, it's a central theme of policy making in the party. Of course, they're very strong on immigration, in a very difficult position. 6 million Muslims in France, maybe more. They have a very difficult situation to face up to, but at least they're strong on refusing to accept there's a necessity within the European Union of free movement of labour. And anyway, they say if they get to power, they'll get out of the European Union altogether and recreate an independent France again.
Yeah.
Would that might happen in this country as well. In recent times, they've also been developing cultural themes of the glories of European civilization against the non-glorious non-themes of so-called Islamic culturalism, which has nothing to do to the benefit of France any more than it does in this country. They also run numerous youth development courses amongst the cadre of the thousands of young people who are active in the FN, particularly in the universities. In fact, amongst French youth between the ages of 16 and 25, the FN is preeminent. There are more FN members in that age group than in any other group, which as far as can be seen, that's a very good thing for the party. Now, in the time remaining to me, I want to touch on some of the allegations which have been made in this country and elsewhere that the FN is untouchable, or one shouldn't be involved with the FN because of allegations of anti-Semitism. Well, I think the opening comment has to be this, that anti-Semitism is rife throughout France. I don't defend that at all. I don't think it's quite wrong. People should be judged according, actually, as Martin Luther King said, the quality of their character rather than their race and background. So that is wrong. But the idea that it's particularly the preserve of a political party, namely the FN, is utterly and totally false. Now, there are two causes célèbres, if you like, famous circumstances which may have led or been instrumental in leading up to that theme. One took place in 1987, and a second took place in 1988. The 88 occasion I'll deal with first. Lepen was attacked in the French Parliament when he was a representative under the proportional representation system by a socialist minister called Michel Durafort. Michel Durafort, a torrent of abuse levelled at Le Pen, and as most fair-minded people thought at the time, this was totally unjustified. Now, four in France stands for oven. And Le Pen got up on his feet and he said, "Merci, Monsieur Michel Durafort Crématoire." Now, an unwise comment. Absolutely an unwise comment, because we know what that is a reference to. And there was pandemonium in the Parliament. And of course, well, he later apologised, but he did say, he said, "I was provoked by terrible attacks on me, and you should never have said that." Anyway, that matter slipped away a bit. Before that, on the 13th of September 1987, Le Pen was on a television programme called TV Le Monde Channel 5, where he was questioned by two very left-wing journalists about his background and his views. And he was asked questions about the Holocaust. And he used the phrase that this was un point de détail, a point of detail of the Second World War, which was a clumsy phrase. That's what he said, and of course it was all over the papers. He didn't actually say it was a little point of detail, he said it was a point of detail. What has never been printed is the fact that all 36 FN MPs with Le Pen made a statement and appeared together saying they were appalled at the deaths from the Holocaust, including Jews, Gypsies, other people who lost their lives in this way. That was never printed in any single newspaper. In other words, Le Pen has always said, and I think he's justified, that he was caught out by hostile questioning. He wanted to repair the damage. He did eventually do so, and he wasn't given credit for it. And there are various other things, my last 5 minutes, which point, I think, to the view that Le Pen himself, and certainly the vast majority of people in the FN, are not anti-Semitic. One of Le Pen's friends for very many years was a man called Robert Hemmerdinger. He was a Paris councillor for over 20 years, a member of the FN, who had a very interesting background. He fought for the Irgun in British-mandated Palestine in 1947. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Terrorists.
He fought for the terrorist movement, the Irgun. That doesn't actually commend him particularly. He changed his mind after that, after all that, and became friendly with Le Pen. Why would Le Pen want to be a friend of a man like Hemmerdinger, if in fact he was of that way? And then there was a shocking bombing of a synagogue in Rue Kopernik on the 3rd of October 1980, when the first person to offer his deepest regrets was Lepen with the party General Secretary Carl Long. I spoke to Carl Long after that, actually. He said it was the most, one of the most appalling events of his political life. The third event is a remarkable booklet written by Jean-Pierre Cohen, Frenchman, editor of Minute magazine, along with Bernard Anthony, MEP and MP, called Ni raciste, ni anti-Semite, neither racist nor anti-Semitic. A marvellous rebuttal in about 38 pages of all the false allegations made against the party in relation to the Jewish community of France and elsewhere. And then you have the work of Jean-René Sulzer, a Jewish professor of economy at the University of Port-Dauphine in Paris, a member of the FN and on the party's council, a staunch supporter. You have the organisation of over 500 people called Juifs pour Le Pen, Jews for Le Pen, people who over the years gave their support to Jean-Marie Le Pen's presidential candidatures, and run by not only Jean-Pierre Cohen just mentioned, but Jean-Pierre Bloch, who I've met, and that shows further lies about the situation. And one of the most interesting, perhaps, is what happened in 2002. A man called Joe Goldenberg, the proprietor of a kosher restaurant in the Rue des Rosiers in Paris. Does anyone know Paris? Do you know the Marais district? Well, he was a proprietor of a kosher restaurant in Rue des Rosiers. Joe Goldenberg, clearly Jewish, made a very well-publicized speech saying that he was going to support Le Pen in the elections. He was going to advise all his eaters to support Le Pen in the elections, and it appeared in the national press. And Joe Goldenberg became something of a hero to the FN for having done so, frankly, having had the courage to do so in difficult circumstances. So all those facts and others show one thing which is absolutely vital, and it is that the FN is a totally respectable political party which in 5 to 10 years is going to be top of the tree in France. I'm quite confident. I think it'll be a mighty good thing. And I hope it's followed in Italy. I hope it's followed in this country. But if it is to be followed in this country, I do believe that the UKIP will have to change some of its ways if that is to be the party. It's also the case, and I'll conclude on this point, that for many years the FN has had within its ranks a number of black and brown people, French Muslims who've always been loyal, and of course the Harkis who fought with the French against the FLN in Algeria. People like Stéphane Durbeck, who's the youngest councillor in France, Farid Smahi, I've known for a while, and also Huguette Fatna, a lady now of about 80, of whom no one's heard this before, but Le Pen is supposed to have had a dalliance or two with her, never substantiated, but absolutely loyal to the party. I used to go to most of the FN big meetings, and all the meetings of the Bleu Blanc Rouge, the red, white and blue in the Bois de Vincennes every year, marvellous. 25,000 people turning up, wonderful music, all the flags, a wonderful exhibition of French patriotism. I hope the party moves on even further as it is doing, and that it achieves all success in the future. Now, I'm more than happy to answer questions for 5 minutes, I think is the period. So, there we are. Thank you.